Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jam Vishnupad Paramamsa Parvajikacharya Asto Tadasita Shishimad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jam Vishnupad Paramamsa Parvajikacharya Asto Tadasita Shishimad. Shringa Guru Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Premse Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shyamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Navadip Dham Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Jamunamai Gangamai Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Jaga Ki Jai. Transcendental Prashadam Distribution Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the sum of devotees Hare Krishna. All glories to the sum of devotees Hare Krishna. All glories to the sum of devotees Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Go Shri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Jai, thank you for coming. Today we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is verse 20 of the 3rd canto, chapter 16. And today's topic will be Madhuvrata Pate, the king of the bees. So we're going to take inspiration from the king of the bees today. The bees, they hover gracefully over the nectar of knowledge, and they seek the essence of flowers. So we can delve into the essence of wisdom and understanding on our journey through these prayers of the sages, who are addressing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they're expressing their realization and humility just from hearing the beautiful speech of the Lord coming before them, and just his dealings and his voice. They were just so satisfied, but yet at the same time we know you're the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but you're so humble, and you're so like, it's like we did something good for you, and we just cursed your devotees. So they're just amazing. So we're going to talk about Lakshmi. She's anxious to secure a place in the abode of the king of bees, and so it mentions her. She awaits upon Krishna, the Lord, to secure a place in his presence. And it's going to illustrate the exalted position of the devotees. So we'll see the devotion of the goddess of Lakshmi and the humility of the devotees, and how Krishna is actually very indifferent to opulences, even though he's attached to his devotees. So let's dive into the verse today. Yamvari Bhutir Upayata Anuvelam Anyar Artarti Biswasira Sadrita Pada Renu Danyar Pitangri Tulasi Navadama Damno Lokam Madhuvrata Patiri Vakamayana Yamvari vibhutir upayati anuvelam anyar. Artarti biswasirasa dvitapada renu. Danyar pitangri tulasi navadama damno. Lokam aduvrata patiriva kamayana. Yam vai vibhutir upayati anuvelam anyar. Artarti biswasira sadrita pada renu. Danyar pitangri tulasi navadama damno. Lokam aduvrata patiriva kamayana. Lokam aduvrata patiriva kamayana. Yam vai vibhutir apayati anuvelam anyar. Artarti biswasira sadrita pada renu. Danyar pitangri tulasi navadama damno. Lokam aduvrata patiriva kamayana. Yam vai vibhutir upayati anuvelam anyar. Artarti biswasira sadrita pada renu. Namja tulasi navadama damno. Lokam aduvrata patiriva kamayana. Vaishnavis? Oh, go ahead, someone else. Yam vai vibhutir upayati anuvelam anyar. Artarti biswasira sadrita pada renu. Danyar pitangri tulasi navadama damno. Lokam aduvrata patiriva kamayana. Yam vai vibhutir upayati anuvelam anyar. Artarti biswasira sadrita pada renu. Danyar pitangri tulasi navadama damno. Lokam aduvrata patiriva kamayana. Oh, sorry. I didn't realize. Okay, go ahead. Yamati Tirvaya Pamayosupatir. Manurita Patiri Vakamayana. Yamvar Vibhutir Upayati Anuvela Manyar. Artarti Biswasira Sadrita Padarenu. Danyar Pitangri Tulasi Navadama Damno. Lokamadurata Paturi Vakamayana. Anybody else? It's a very poetic, beautiful verse. Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead, Prabhu. Yamvar Vibhutir Upayati Anuvelam Anyar. Artarti Biswasira Sadrita Padarenu. Danyar Pitangri Tulasi Navadama Damno. Lokamadurata Paturi Vakamayana. Thank you. Yam. Whom? Vai. Certainly. Vibhuti. Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. Upayati. Waits upon. Anuvilam. Occasionally. Anya. By others. Artha. Material facility. RTB. By those who desire. Swashirasa. On their own heads. Drita. Accepting. Pada. Of the feet. Renu. The dust. Danya. By the devotees. Arpita. Offered. Angri. At your feet. Tulasi. Of tulasi leaves. Nava. Fresh. Dama. On the garland. Damna. Having a place. Lokam. The place. Madhuvrata Pate. Of the king of the bees. Iva. Like. Kamayana. Is anxious to secure. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. The goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, the dust of whose feet is worn on the heads by others, waits upon you as appointed, for she is anxious to secure a place in the abode of the king of bees, who hovers on the fresh wreath of tulsi leaves offered at your feet by some blessed devotee. You guys want to repeat that? You want to repeat? The goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, the dust of whose feet is worn on the head by others, waits upon you as appointed, for she is anxious to secure a place in the abode of the king of bees, who hovers on the fresh wreath of tulsi leaves, offered at your feet by some blessed devotee. Purport. As previously described, Tulasi has attained a superior quality due to being placed at the lotus feet of the Lord. The comparison made here is very nice. As the king of bees hovers over the Tulasi leaves offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, so Lakshmi, the goddess, who is sought by the demigods, Brahmanas, Vaishnavas, and everyone else, always engages in rendering service to the lotus feet of the Lord. The conclusion is that no one can be the benefactor of the Lord. Everyone is actually the servant of the Lord. There's a nice reference there. Om Gana Timanandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chakshus Unmeditamena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobistam Stapitamena Bhutale Swayamupakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapa Tubhischa, Kripa Sindhu Bevacha, Patitanam Pavinebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So the translation again. The goddess of fortune Lakshmi, the dust of whose feet is worn on the head by others, awaits upon you. As appointed, for she is anxious to secure a place in the abode of the king of bees, who hovers on the fresh wreath of tulsi leaves offered at your feet by some blessed devotee. Wow, so it's very beautiful. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada is referencing this particular verse in the Madhya Lila 1380. Very beautiful verse. I like to just chant that. It's so nice. Or we could chant it together. This is what they chant actually to purify oneself on the altar when you're chanting, to see our position as a servant of the servant. Naham vipro nacha nara patir napi vasho nasudro naham varni nacha griha patir no vanasto yatir va kintu projani kila paramananda pranamritabler gopi bartu parakamalyor dasa dasanudasaha. I'm not a Brahmana, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya or a Sudra, nor am I a Brahmachari, a householder, a Vanaprastha, or a sannyasi. I identify myself only as the servant of the servant of the servant of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna, the maintainer of the gopis. He is like an ocean of nectar, and he is the cause of universal transcendental bliss. He is always existing with brilliance. So this is so nicely described here. So this purport emphasizes a very humble and profound idea that in the divine relationship with Krishna, no one can be considered a benefactor to him. Instead, everyone is his servant. And even the highest personality, goddess of fortune, Lakshmi Devi, she considers herself the servant of the Lord's servants. So this purport is going to teaches us humility and devotion that we find in the practice of Bhakti Yoga. So we'll go on here. So this particular prayer, as I mentioned, it's Pujaris chant this every morning before they worship the deity for purification. It's called Bhuta Suddhi. And this purifies the bodily elements by identifying ourselves as an eternal servant of the servant of Krishna. So this is one. I'll just read these few prayers. We already read one, but there's two more here. I am by nature the eternal servant of Krishna, but because of bad fortune, I've been inimical toward him from time immemorial. And thus, I have identified myself with my body and continuously wandered in the cycle of birth and death in the material world, suffering the burning threefold miseries. Now, as a result of some unimaginable good fortune, my spiritual master's mercy has enabled me to know that I am Krishna's eternal servant, an infinitesimal spiritual being, completely apart from the gross and subtle body. And so, by the order of my spiritual master, I have obtained the good fortune of serving his lotus feet and following in his footsteps the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, Shri Shri Rukmini Dwarkadish, Jagannath Baldev, Srimati Subhadra. So this is our worshipful deities. And then there's another nice prayer. One more prayer here. I won't say the Sanskrit, but it starts, Divyam Shri Hari Mandarandya Tilakam Kantam Sumalan Vitam. So one should meditate on oneself situated at the feet of one's spiritual master. One's pure body clothed in fine new cloth and decorated with wonderful tilak. One's chest marked with the holy name and anointed with sandal pulp, and one's neck bedecked with a garland. So it's a good meditation for me today. So just to kind of give a recap, we took a break from this particular chapter. And so, as I mentioned, the Supreme Lord had just approached the four Kumaras who cursed his two servants. And the Lord immediately appeared there. And he said some cryptic words, very deep, wonderful prayers. The four Kumaras were so amazed by them, and they couldn't really understand them. But as the response of the four Kumaras, we'll see here, we're in this section right here, from the Kumaras' reply to Lord Narayan. And from 16 to 24, they're basically saying, you alone protect the Brahmanas, you respect them to set an example, you don't depend on anyone's mercy. And then they end with saying, we curse to, faultless men, and we accept whatever you ordain on them or on us. So here the sages are humbly praying, acknowledging Krishna's supreme position as a protector of righteousness, the ultimate source and object of worship, the source of all blessings. So they're expressing their surrender here and recognizing his transcendental nature. So what we're going to do is basically go through these prayers just to kind of get a review and get an understanding and a visuals. And there's so much visual and poeticness in these prayers. And this is the quality of a devotee, poetic. So the four Kumaras very poetically, giving their reply to the Supreme Lord here. So first of all, in text number 16, where they start their prayers, the verse actually this is where the sages are acknowledging their limitation and understanding the intent of the Supreme Lord. And so they recognize that, you're the ruler of all, and that you're actually speaking in our favor, like if we did some service for you. So this reflects their humility, and it reflects the mercy of the Lord. So amazing. Just to see how the dealings between the devotees and the Lord, it's so beautiful. And in the purport to that verse, Srila Prabhupada says, the Lord was speaking in such a humble way just to show them his all-merciful favor. And then in text number 17, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport there, the Lord is the super soul of everyone. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that the Lord is the source of all emanations. Thus, he is also the source of Brahma and Shiva. So the sages in this particular prayer, they're acknowledging Krishna's position as a supreme director of the Brahminical culture, and they consider him the object of worship, not only for the gods, but for the Brahmanas. And so this verse highlights Krishna's role as a divine example for teaching others the highest principles and values. And then in text number 18, this emphasizes the Lord as the source of eternal occupation of all living entities, and has always protected religious principles. So the sages, they see the Lord as the supreme objective of all religious practices, and they view him as inexhaustible and unchangeably eternally. So in that purport, it emphasizes that surrendering to the Lord is the most confidential aspect of religious principles. And in the Bhagavad Gita, it describes how other paths may lead to heavenly planets, but not to Krishna's abode. So in the purport there, Srila Prabhupada says, here also the sages confirm the statement that the Supreme Lord, not the demigods, is the ultimate goal of religious principles. There are many foolish propagandists who say that worship of the demigods is also a way to reach the supreme goal. But in the authorized statements of Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, this is not accepted. Bhagavad Gita says that one who worships a particular demigod can reach the demigod's planet, but one who worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead can enter into Vaikuntha. So this painting very much depicts how worshiping the demigods, you may get some benefits, but actually they're temporary. That's why it shows the personification of death there. So in text number 19, the sages are expressing that mystics and transcendentalists can transcend ignorance and material desires by the Lord's mercy. So they point out that the Supreme Lord can't be favored by anyone because he's already the ultimate source of all blessings and mercy. So the purport stresses that more, that we can cross beyond nescience only by the Lord's mercy. And the Lord can't be favored. So in that purport, Srila Prabhupada says, actually, one is favored by the Supreme Lord, or says, unless one is favored by the Supreme Lord, one cannot cross over the ocean of nescience, of repeated birth and death. Here it is stated that yogis or mystics cross beyond nescience by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Prabhupada ends that purport by saying, actually, everyone needs the favor of the Lord for successful understanding of his human mission. So just imagine you're in an ocean. What can you do by yourself? So we need help. And this comes from the Lord and his devotees. So in text number 20, this is today's verse. It teaches about humility and devotion in the practice of Bhakti Yoga. And it shows that in the eyes of those who truly love the Lord, even the most exalted beings like Lakshmi Devi, they become humble servants in the presence of divine love and devotion to Krishna. And in the purport, it explains that Tulsi leaves worn at the lotus feet are more dear to him than the goddess of fortune. So it's highlighting the principle of the Lord is not attached to material opulence. So in the purport there, Srila Prabhupada says, again, as the king of bees hovers over the Tulasi leaves offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, so Lakshmi, the goddess, who is sought by the demigods, brahmanas, Vaishnavas, and everyone else, always engages in rendering service to the lotus feet of the Lord. So Tulsi is so important. And in verse 21, it talks about the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi. She sometimes becomes envious of the Tulsi leaves which are placed at the feet of the Lord because they remain fixed there. They don't move. Whereas Lakshmi, although she's stationed at the chest of the Lord, sometimes she has to please other devotees who pray for her favor. So she has to satisfy her numerous devotees. But Tulsi leaves, they never forsake their position, and the Lord therefore appreciates the service of Tulsi more than the service of Lakshmi. So just see how Tulsi has become extraordinary and attains special qualities by being near the Lord's feet. So here's the bees. There's a beautiful verse or purport in the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is from the first canto, 11th chapter, text number 26. This is a chapter entitled Lord Krishna's Entrance into Dwarka. And so in the purport there, Srila Prabhupada mentions, just like bees hovering over flowers or collecting nectar, so the devotees are drawn to the divine presence of Lord Krishna. So that's just a summary actually I did there. So let's get right into what Prabhupada said here. So the goddess Lakshmi is irresistibly drawn to serve the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, which are adorned with tulsi leaves offered by devoted worshippers. So the pure devotees are always hankering after the Lord's lotus feet. The lotus has a kind of honey which is transcendentally relished by the devotees. They are like the bees who are always after the honey. Srila Rupa Goswami, the great devotee Acharya of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, has sung a song about this lotus honey, comparing himself to a bee. So this is a very beautiful prayer that Prabhupada quotes in his purport there. And this is the prayer. O my Lord Krishna, I beg to offer my prayers unto you. My mind is like the bee, and it is after some honey. Kindly therefore give my bee mind a place at your lotus feet, which are the resources for all transcendental honey. I know that even big demigods like Brahma, do not see the rays of the nails of your lotus feet, even though they are engaged in deep meditation for years together. Still, O infallible one, my ambition is such, for you are very merciful to your surrendered devotees. O Madhava, I know also that I have no genuine devotion for the service of your lotus feet, but because your lordship is inconceivably powerful, you can do what is impossible to be done. Your lotus feet can deride even the nectar of the heavenly kingdom, and therefore I am very much attracted by them. O Supreme Eternal, please, therefore let my mind be fixed at your lotus feet, so that eternally I may be able to relish the taste of your transcendental service. So these are devotees, they just want to be satisfied at Krishna's lotus feet. Prabhupada says that they actually have no ambition to see his all-beautiful face or aspire for the protection of the strong arms of the Lord. They're humble by nature, and the Lord is always leaning towards such humble devotees. So in text 21, it also describes how this purport underscores that although the Lord is attached to his devotees, he's not attached to material opulence. And devotees glorify him through devotion, not physical markings or offerings. So in the purport there, Srila Prabhupada said, it is said in the Brahma Samhita that the Lord is always served by many hundreds of thousands of goddesses of fortune in his Vaikuntha planet. Yet because of his attitude of renunciation of all opulences, he is not attached to any one of them. So in text number 22, that purport there elaborates how the Lord's role as the personification of all religion and his appearance in various ages is to protect this religion. And so it mentions there that for purification, we get that purification through devotion in Kali Yuga. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, the devotees pray to Lord Chaitanya, therefore to eliminate their stock of passion and ignorance, the most conspicuous asset in this yuga. In the Krishna consciousness movement, one cleanses himself of the mode of passion and ignorance by chanting the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, as introduced by Lord Chaitanya. So in text number 23, this purport kind of emphasizes the leaders should respect brahmanas and devotees, and it's essential for maintaining the auspicious path of worship in society. And in the purport there, Prabhupada mentions, when Krishna was on the planet, he set a practical example. He was a cowherd boy, and he was very respectful to the brahmanas and the devotees. And in text 24, in the purport there, Prabhupada also mentions here, Lord Krishna was never reduced in his position by becoming a cowherd boy. Everyone knew that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, yet his behavior was exemplary. So we see in this pastime with the four Kumaras also, Krishna's humble attitude never reduces his position. So in text 24 is very illustrative. So it also mentioned there in the purport that Lord Krishna was never reduced in his position by offering respect to Sudama Brahmana. He washed his feet, put the water on his head. This is Krishna. This is our God. People become God and they think, what would you imagine if you were God? You just like control everything and boss everybody around, right? But you see the humble position of the Supreme Lord. And then in text 24 also the purport, it describes how Lord Krishna was never reduced in his position by offering respect to other devotees like Nanda Maharaj. He brought his shoes, put him on his head and brought his shoes to his father. And also in that same purport, how Krishna's position was never reduced by offering respect to the Pandava's mother, Kunti. He offered very much respect to her as a very advanced devotee. And then also it describes there in that same purport that Lord Krishna was never reduced in his position by his service to the Pandavas. And also how he's eternally the opulent prince of Dwarka. And all his appearances are meaningful because they show his real characteristics to us, the conditioned souls, who've forgotten their relationship with him. So he does everything for our benefit. And then also he says here, he's eternally the lover of the damsels of Vrindavan. And so in 25, that purport notes the sage's repentance. As we know, when they came in, they were blocked. And so they cursed the two doorkeepers. And so they were repenting there for their, what they did. So in the purport there, Srila Prabhupada says, the cursing of Jai and Vijay is here repented. Now the Kumaras are thinking in terms of their position in the modes of passion and ignorance, and they're prepared to accept any kind of punishment from the Lord. In general, when dealing with devotees, we should not try to find faults. In Bhagavad Gita also it is confirmed that the devotee who faithfully serves the Supreme Lord, even if found to commit a gross mistake, should be considered a sadhu or saintly person. Due to former habits, he may commit some wrong, but because he is engaged in the service of the Lord, that wrong should not be taken very seriously. So this is a good lesson we're learning. So that is Maruvrata Pate, the king of the bees. So in essence, these prayers, they're reflecting the sage's deep reverence and realization of Lord Krishna's supreme position and his role as a protector of righteousness, and in their own humility and surrender, they surrender, and they acknowledge that the Lord's actions are always for the benefit of all living beings. So in conclusion, the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi, she's eager to seek a place in the abode of the king of bees, who hover over the fresh tulsi leaves offered at Krishna's lotus feet. So may we also be as eager in our devotion and service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, as we continue in our spiritual journey. Hare Krishna. Sorry. So any comments, questions, realizations? Yes, Archita Prabhu.
Haribol Gaudacandra Prabhu. Thank you for the nice presentation, wonderful visuals. I'm not finding fault, but there's one word that you keep mispronouncing that really needs to be explained. The word H-O-V-E-R is hover, not hoover. I'll explain the difference.
Oh, okay.
To hover means stationary flight, like what helicopters do or bumblebees do, or like that, flying in place, stationary flight. That's hovering. You say hoover, which means something completely different. Hoover is actually a made-up word. When the vacuum cleaner was invented, one of the most famous ones was hoover, H-O-O-V-E-R. So it became a verb. To hoover meant to vacuum. Just like we say to Xerox when we say copy something. It's not to Xerox, it's actually to copy, but because Xerox was popular, everybody says, can you make me a Xerox? Like that. So everybody started using the word hoover to mean to vacuum. Go and hoover your room, like that, to vacuum. So there's a big difference. Hover is stationary flight, hoover is to vacuum.
Okay. Thank you for that. Jai. Okay. Hold on, Maharaj. Let's bring in the mic. Okay, Maharaj.
Thanks for that comment, Archita Prabhu. I just wanted to add something to it. It's very easy. If you think of a bee over a flower or over and gathering what they call the honey or gathering the pollen, that's hovering. It stays in one place, but its little feet are bringing the feet to the mouth, and that's it. But the body itself is not raising up, it's not going down, it's not going sideways, it's simply in one place, as Archita was just mentioning, like that.
But the bee, what's it doing? It's hoovering all the nectar. Like a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, we got the
Jai.
vacuum.
Yes, Mata.
Well, no, I still have my leg.
Thanks, Haribol. Thank you so much for your lesson and for the visuals. I have a question. Hopefully it's not offensive, but the Kumaras wanted to be childs, so they will not be contaminated by, growing up. And so a surprise in one sense, they will curse the Jai and Vijay at Vaikunta, because it seems to be, I mean, I know Krishna's orchestrating everything, but at the same time, how do you come, the little kids could curse, them when they didn't want to grow to get any of that contamination. So I have a little bit like noise in my head about that. Thanks.
Well, their bodies were like children, but they were actually very wise, the oldest sages in the universe. So they were very knowledgeable. In the 10th canto, there's a chapter, the prayers by the personified Vedas. You just see how intelligent they are. Those prayers, if I read them, I'll fall asleep. It's like they're so deep. But yeah, so that their mentality is not childish, but they're still kind of under the modes of ignorance and passion. So that's why they cursed. And also, as you said, it was arranged by Krishna. So it's nice pastime. Any other? Yes, Prabhu. Bhakti Avatar.
Haribol. Thanks, Gaudacandra. Always an amazing class. I thought it was interesting that 2 days in a row we heard yesterday Srila Prabhupada and today Gaudacandra mentioned the fact about how devotees should always be in harmonious relationships.
Yeah.
And Srila Prabhupada, he writes in the purport to the, I believe it's the second or third verse to the Nectar of Instruction, that I founded this ISKCON society to facilitate the 6 loving exchanges between devotees. So it's very important that we actually, have loving relationships with one another. And if there is some misunderstanding, we should always try to clear it up as soon as possible so that harmony can be maintained.
Jai. Thank you, Prabhu. Okay. Thank you for your kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhagavatam. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.